Welcome on in, Pats Nation, for another video. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the New England Patriots and more specifically, some of more drama that is surrounding this team because let me tell you, storylines are coming out, rumors are coming out, news is coming out, okay? This is the period of time where teams who are not going to the postseason, aka the Patriots, now for 2 years in a row, this is the time period where you're looking at week 18, but more specifically, you're looking at the offseason and you're looking at what went wrong. And this is where changes start to be made. This is where news and rumors about what was going in the locker room all year long finally comes out through the media. And we have some of those storylines here today. But by the title, you can tell that the New England Patriots head coach, at least current head coach, Bill Belichick, is going to be meeting with owner Robert Kraft in less than a week to discuss his future with the team. And I guarantee you that some of the topics we're going to be talking about today are things that Robert Kraft is going to be bringing up. But let's just roll that Patriots Global intro and hop into today's video. First off, I know what a lot of you guys are going to say. Well, Patriots Global, Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft, they meet every single offseason. So them meeting this offseason specifically isn't anything out of the ordinary. And of course, no, it's not. They do meet every single offseason. Last year, supposedly when they met, is when Bill Belichick got that contract extension. That's when they talked about his plan for the offseason. They talked about what went wrong in 2022. Okay, let's remember that really as soon as week 18 concluded, we heard what the plan was for the Patriots. We heard that Gerard Mayo was coming back. We heard that Belichick was coming back. We heard that they were going to be firing Matt Patricia and looking for candidates for offensive coordinator, something the Patriots themselves came out and said, which is something that they rarely ever do. What's different about this offseason is that there's been rumblings all season long, especially over the last few weeks, about Bill Belichick's future with the team and how Robert Kraft started to realize, if not finally accepted the fact that he had to move on from Bill Belichick during that game in Germany. And one rumor that does sound very accurate, because let's remember one very specific moment, and that's when Robert Kraft, in that big puffer jacket with the meme going around, just puts his head down in straight agony to represent what Pats Nation has felt all offseason long. But Andrew Callahan, and this is a guy that reports news for the Patriots. He's always right, okay? He doesn't come out with fluke reports. He's also the same guy who described the New England Patriots chaos and drama last offseason that was going within the locker room, and all of it ended up being factually correct. But he put an article out recently on the Boston Herald about some things that happened during this 2023 season that led to the dysfunction that we saw from the team from this entire 2023 season. And we're going to be breaking that down because, again, there's a lot of things that happened behind the scenes. And these are all things that Robert Kraft is going to know about, things that might lead to the firing or the trade or the departure of Bill Belichick, and maybe even more than just Bill Belichick. Maybe several coaches, maybe Matt Groh, also the general manager. So let's start to break these down. So the first storyline that he hit on here, it says owner Robert Kraft wanted the team to hire Bill OBrien as the team's offensive coordinator. Bill Belichick wanted to keep Matt Patricia for another year because things were improving offensively down the stretch of 2022. This is something that also makes a ton of sense. We know that Bill Belichick, in the beginning, that offseason of 2022, he said, Matt Patricia is our offensive coordinator. If this doesn't go right, you can blame me. And I said this myself on this channel. It went wrong, Bill. It went terribly wrong, and you were never there to take the accountability. So what did Bill Belichick do this offseason to add to the offense? Because this offense arguably somehow looked worse through 3/4 of the season than it did in 2022. And was that some self-sabotage by Bill Belichick to try to say, should have listened to me? Who knows? Because we know that there was an instance somewhat like this a couple of years ago. I want to say 2016, 2017, when the Patriots traded Jimmy Garoppolo. We know that Bill Belichick wanted to keep Jimmy Garoppolo as the future and get rid of Tom Brady sooner than they even did. But we know that Tom Brady supposedly said, you need to trade Jimmy Garoppolo for assets to build this team around me. And Robert Kraft forced the hand of Bill Belichick, which caused a lot of that drama that came with it. And again, I believe 2017, if I remember correctly. The fact that Bill Belichick wanted to roll with Matt Patricia for another year, a defensive-minded coach and offensive coordinator, is absolutely absurd. And again, if true, which again, Andrew Callahan is a very, very reliable source, so I don't see why it wouldn't be true, just proves even more on why Bill has to go, because he's just not changing with the times. He's not the coach that he necessarily once was in every single aspect. The second storyline that Callahan hit on here was that many people within the Patriots organization believed that Bill OBrien wanted to clean house and build his own coaching staff along the offensive side of the football, but Bill Belichick denied him. This is something that we are begging the team to do this offseason. Whether it's Belichick or another head coach, you look at the not just personnel, but the coaching staff along the offense, and they have to do something. At running back, I would argue, need a new running backs coach. Wide receiver, you need a new wide receiver coach. When is the last time this team truly developed a wide receiver? Now, you can say Demario Douglas, but I believe Demario Douglas is being good and being developed in spite of the bad coaching staff. I believe that Demario Douglas is just a good wide receiver that is playing good football and not the Patriots developing him. You need a new wide receivers coach. I would push back on offensive line coach because we'll touch on something here. And, I think the only way they move on from Adrian Clem is if Adrian Clem clearly just doesn't want to be here. And if that's the case, then you move on from him. But I wouldn't put Adrian Clem, a first-year offensive lineman, into the mix of kind of having to rebuild. But even the backup coaches, the lack of a quarterbacks coach here. And it seems like Bill OBrien wanted to come in and make a change to that. But Bill Belichick told him that he couldn't. Another massive problem of Belichick just sticking with his guys. Belichick sticks with what he knows. He sticks with guys that he personally likes. That's the big problem with Belichick as of late, is that Belichick is coaching with emotion. He's not coaching with what is best for the team. And as soon as a head coach starts coaching on emotion, rather than just doing his job, that is when all of the bricks start to fall. Next storyline here is that the only members of the offensive coaching staff that Bill OBrien trusted at a professional level were Evan Rothstein, the assistant quarterback coach, and Will Lawton, the tight ends coach. Both of those coaches, by the way, were coaches that Bill OBrien had brought with him when he got the job here as offensive coordinator in New England. A team source even said, and I quote, "The staff dynamic is completely effed up." There have been more storylines going on here in New England than have been given credit for. And a lot of the things that we're preaching all season long, even all offseason, and things that we're preaching that they have to do and must address this coming offseason are apparently things that Bill OBrien was pushing for Belichick to address, and Belichick is the one that stood back and said no. Next up here is that Bill OBrien pulled the offense closer to him because of what was going on. As in running the ball more, meeting more than what they've done. Bill O'Brien essentially felt that he had to take on a bigger role with every single portion of the offense due to a lack of quality of coaching, due to a lack of his trust amongst those other offensive coaching staffs. And I definitely believe that because of this, Bill O'Brien wasn't able to coach in certain aspects of this offense that he would have liked to because he was in a multitude of different ways. It's kind of like a few years ago where Belichick had to dip his toes into the offense. So then the defense took a step back because Belichick wasn't able to just focus on the defense all offseason long like he normally was able to. Example, 2022. Defense was good, but took a step back from what we were used to seeing. Offense also wasn't good, which is why the Patriots were not able to make the postseason. Bill O'Brien's frustration apparently began with the offensive line and wide receiver coaches apparently just back in the. And one thing I have to push back on here, kind of against Bill O'Brien, is that while I do agree a lot of these offensive coaches need to be fired and there needs to be a reset here offensively, is that they can only do with essentially what's given to them. And it's the same case for Bill O'Brien, right? Like I just stated, back in spring, he had growing frustration with the wide receivers coach and the offensive line coach. They can only do with what's given to them. Now, at the end of the day, I give that more to Adrian Clem and the offensive line. The fact that Bill Belichick and Matt Groh really thought that they were going to get past with the offensive line, more specifically the offensive tackles that they had under contract for the season, was absolutely absurd. And we knew heading into the offseason last year that it needed to be a big priority, and they didn't make it one. They didn't even try to duct tape it. They tried to scotch tape it and say, we'll be okay for a year. And it has been the absolute death to any success that the Patriots offense has been having. In terms of wide receiver, the Patriots wide receivers haven't been great. A lot of them have just been checked out, but there is still a lot more talent at wide receiver than there has been at offensive line the entire year, okay? You still have Devontae Parker. You still have Juju Smith-Schuster. You still had Kendrick Bourne. You still had two rookies in DeMario Douglas and Kayshon Boutte. You had enough as a wide receivers coach to still get enough done and get enough from that group, but they still were not able to. It looked like crap even in the offseason. One of the worst, if not the worst, wide receiver groups in the National Football League, but you have a core that should, at the very least, be able to get it done. And I think one of the bigger problems here, too, is that especially at wide receiver, there's been a lack of motivation. And it is the wide receivers coach's job to discipline those guys, to make sure they stay motivated. And clearly, that's not happening here. Bill O'Brien is not the only guy on the offensive side of the football, though, that apparently and reportedly has been frustrated, though, because Patriots offensive line coach Adrian Clem confronted and yelled at Director of Player Personnel Matt Groh earlier in this season because he didn't feel like his opinion was heard. Apparently, it even went as far as to say that Adrian Clem yelled at Matt Groh because of a lack of overall talent amongst this offensive line. Again, is Adrian Clem a good coach, a bad coach? We don't know because he's not going to make diamonds with pebbles. You can't ask any offensive line coach to do that. Not every single O-line coach is going to be Dante Scarnecchia. So really, Adrian Clem has been set up for failure. You can't evaluate him when you didn't give him guys to be able to evaluate him well enough for, because you didn't have enough guys at the position to be able to actually get through the season. And not drafting an offensive lineman, not signing one in free agency or trading for one, but saying we don't like, because apparently this is what Matt Groh and Bill Belichick's thought process was, is that they did not like or view the offensive lineman in free agency high enough. So they wanted to go the veteran route and piece it together for a year. Well, guess what? It didn't work out for you. Riley Reef, that veteran offensive tackle you signed, barely played this season, didn't work out at tackle because he looked absolutely putrid. You tried him at guard and he looked better, but only played a few snaps for you all season long. You're telling me that there was no other tackle that you could have signed in free agency for at least a year. Even Orlando Brown couldn't have at least signed him for a year to have a quality offensive line and then readdress it a year later if you thought that there was going to be a better guy in free agency a year later to build your team around. It's the same thing that we've been saying, and the same reason that, again, I've been saying Bill Belichick has to go. It is time for him to move on because of these personnel decisions. The fact that he thought that I can scotch tape this offense for a year and it'll be fine after what happened in 2022 is absolutely mind-boggling and a big part of why this team is where it is, being a 4-win team in 2023. Apparently, Bill Belichick and Matt Groh both believed that the available offensive tackles, like I just said, the available offensive tackles in free agency and the draft were overrated. That's why they didn't draft a tackle. That's why they tried the City So experience, a guard over at tackle, because they thought all of the other tackles were just too overrated. And that's why they settled. We even got a little bit of news here about Juju Smith-Schuster. Andrew Callahan hints here that, or rather reports, that Juju Smith-Schuster lost all explosion due to a chronic knee injury he suffered the season prior. This is really no news. This is something we all knew with him and the Kansas City Chiefs. We just thought that Bill Belichick was smart enough in his evaluation to know that, hey, he had a knee injury with the Chiefs. Check to make sure if that's okay or not. And somehow Belichick didn't know about this knee injury. So that hints a little bit more on kind of the situation going on with Juju. Next up here is that the locker room lost a lot of confidence in Mac Jones following the 34-0 blowout loss at home to the Saints. That's essentially when every other player checked out against Mac Jones. The staff began deliberating a quarterback change, but due to Zappe's struggles in relief for Mac Jones, they decided that they were going to wait it out. That is why we did not see Bailey Zappe earlier on and why we saw Mac Jones being the starter for as long as we did, despite. Now, look, with how bad Mac Jones was playing, I don't know what, Zappe's struggles were that were so bad that despite what Mac Jones was putting on film, they thought that he was still a better quarterback than Zappe. But that's what's being reported, and that's apparently why they didn't go with Zappe sooner. They also said that Will Grier was never a serious candidate to start. Why did we have Will Grier in the building? Why did we keep Will Grier around for as long as we did? And why was he signed to the active roster, especially over Malik Cunningham, if he was never a serious candidate to start? Next up here is that a team source said that there, and I quote, definitely isn't a healthy communication in there about trying to win football games. So apparently there has been a clear disconnect, and it's not specific enough to where that disconnect is. Is it players to coaches? Is it coaches to Bill Belichick? Is it Belichick to everybody else? But we know that there's clearly miscommunication and misunderstandings and just an overall lack of communication within the New England Patriots organization. Now, guys, we're not done yet because there is still more from Andrew Callahan's report about the total dysfunction going on with the entire team this season. Because now we have a little bit of a report on the relationship between Mac Jones and Bailey Zappe, because from what he was saying, Bailey Zappe and Mac Jones have absolutely zero relationship. And to make it worse, they hardly talk. There's no communication between the two. They hardly talk. Now, this past week, against the Bills when Zappe rushed for that touchdown, Mac Jones was actually the first one down the sidelines to congratulate Zappe. So maybe that relationship is growing to be better. But at least when this column dropped by Andrew Callahan, from what was reported, there is tension between those two. There is no communication. There's no relationship. They don't talk. That also helps to shed some light. Now, following the New England Patriots' second blowout loss in back-to-back weeks at home against the New Orleans Saints, Belichick proclaimed to the media that they would be, and I quote, starting over. And we all know what that meant. You know, go back to the game following the New Orleans game, right? When they get blown out 34-0. And we hear Belichick say that there's going to be changes coming. And we all were like, is it a trade? Are they going to make personnel moves? A change at quarterback? What is it going to be? And apparently to Belichick, what the start over was supposed to be was doubling down on fundamentals, techniques, and core philosophies of their football team. That was it. It was Belichick starting over was basically reiterating things. That's what the big change was. As their playoff hopes started to die down, Belichick tightened his grip on the overall program that started to collapse from every single angle. Next up here, we have a little bit of news on Jack Jones because Jack Jones blew up on cornerbacks coach Mike Pellegrino for not starting him at halftime for the Colts game in Germany. A day later, Jack Jones was cut. So for those of you wondering what led to Jack Jones' cut, there's been a plethora of different things that led to that release. But the final straw for New England, after they already gave Jack Jones disciplinary actions the week prior, because he wasn't starting at halftime, he went in and yelled at the cornerback coach. That's why he was released. We even got a little bit of news here about Trent Brown. And I actually just released a video on Trent Brown and wish I had this to back up my what I was saying. But Trent Brown has openly discussed his plans to play for an NFC team next season. Trent Brown also said that Bill Belichick installed changes to the offensive line room after Adrian Clem left the team due to an illness. Also, still hasn't come back since then. Trent Brown went on to say that the entire offensive lineman began learning Dante Scarnecchia's techniques and drills instead of the more modernized methods that they were learning throughout the entire season. So not only were there game to game where the offensive line continuity was being switched up, forget game to game, drive to drive, offensive line continuity being switched up. But apparently, Adrian Clem was teaching the team one way with more modernized techniques. He leaves, and Belichick is teaching an old school Dante Scarnecchia type of technique, which apparently didn't go very well with those O-linemen. And then next up here, assistant offensive line coach Billy Yates took over full-time for Adrian Clem due to his absence, while practice squad offensive line James Ferentz was also coaching the players. That one I don't necessarily hate. I actually think that that's a good idea and that James Ferentz could actually become a coach for New England within a few years. And then the last report that we have here is that league sources do not expect Adrian Clem to return to the team in 2024, though his contract runs beyond 2024. To me, I really wonder with these reports about Adrian Clem, is Adrian Clem away from this team because he's dealing with an illness, or is Adrian Clem away from this team because he doesn't want to be here? He's done coaching. He's done playing for Belichick. He's done with the miscommunications. And he's done looking like he is a bad coach because Matt Groh and Bill Belichick refused to give him quality players along the offensive line, which is a major reason why this offense has not been successful throughout the entire year. There was so much to take away from those reports, but I tried to pick the biggest storylines and the biggest pieces of information that we were given in that column. What are your guys' thoughts, though? There's clearly a lot of dysfunction going on within the New England Patriots locker room. And when there's this amount of dysfunction, it's going to relay itself onto the football field and result in a team that is only a 4-win team. This team hasn't looked like the New England Patriots. This isn't the Patriots way. And after reading this column, it makes a ton of sense why. And I don't know any coach that would want to coach here. I don't know any player that would want to play here if these things are going to continue. They need to get rid of the toxicity, and that unfortunately is going to also include Bill Belichick. Fire Matt Groh. Get a new general manager. Fire Bill Belichick. Move on from Belichick. Trade him, but find a new head coach. Hopefully, Adrian Clem can come back, because if not, you're looking for a brand new offensive lineman. Clearly, nobody could get along because you have Matt Groh and Bill Belichick on one side of the spectrum trying to put in a philosophy of an old school, early to mid 2000 scheme that unfortunately players in today's game, today's society just does not mesh well with. What are your guys' thoughts, though? Let me know in the comment section below. Remember, leave a big like on this video, and of course, subscribe to the channel for all of your New England Patriots news. We have a lot of news that's going to be coming out soon about Bill Belichick. What do they decide to do with him, and maybe some more coaching staff after that. As always, though, guys, I appreciate you for watching, and most importantly, never forget, go Pats.